crop of a portrait has a voice. It can make it whisper, or it can shout by changing only the position of the picture's edge. We're convinced an uncropped image is more dependable, more real, but there's no way out of it. Even by just taking a picture, you've already cropped. You decided on the size of the crop by holding a certain camera and a certain lens and pointed it in a certain direction. Things have been excluded. So this first crop is made when you press the shutter button. Once you take the picture, further cropping can only take data away, so we need to be careful. Extreme cropping will expose pixels for what they really are, little squares of pseudo-reality. This was also a problem with film, because the film grain remained the same size as you reduce the area of the visible picture around it. Here's a half-frame image where the grain is already pronounced, and as we crop in, it gets really gritty really fast. This is what people mean when they say larger formats provide higher quality. In large format, the grain is relatively small compared to the size of the negative, so there's more forgiveness when you crop in. So why take the chance with a crop? What if a crop can improve a portrait? Or if it can change its voice? Put another way, what if not cropping an image makes it worse? It's an arbitrary restriction that holds you back for no real reason. Like if you chose on principle not to focus, or not to look through the viewfinder. When I edit, I try and honour the image and I'll work it to the best of my abilities. The decision not to crop can be fatal for a portrait. Cropping isn't just zooming in on an image, it can also change its shape. The relationship between its length and its height is the aspect ratio. The ratio that comes out of most cameras is 4:6, which also happens to be my least favourite. I can't think of a good use for it. If you have a good reason to use 4:6 over the alternatives I'll describe next, then leave a note in the comments below and maybe I'll learn to love it. Let's start with a simple square, like the old Hasselblads used to produce. It doesn't have a sense of orientation like portrait or landscape, so when you take the picture, there's one less decision to make. It's great for social media pictures, LinkedIn profile pictures, even your email icon. The 4:5 is great for portraits because you can frame it easily. The picture frame industry is holding on tight to this old standard, even if camera sensor manufacturers have long forgotten its power. But don't go away thinking you can only frame standard size prints. Custom mats allow any shape print to fit any frame. Old large format cameras used film that was exactly 4:5 inches or 8:10, and it was common to enlarge to 16:20. And these all are in that 4:5 aspect ratio. Unlike square, we've now got a decision to make about the picture's orientation. Portrait orientation mimics the orientation of the face or a person's body. It's also the orientation we consume content on our phones. Landscape orientation for portrait feels a bit more modern, especially for close-ups, a bit more cinematic. It also accommodates a huge range of compositions. Then there's 16:9. 16:9 is very long and thin, so much so it's rarely used in the portrait orientation. But in landscape, it's the default for movies and TV. It's got a place for stills because the pictures are often consumed on computer monitors and phones turned sideways. It's dramatic, it's open, and because it's pretty much the opposite aspect ratio and orientation of the human face, it forces creativity out of the composition. With a portrait, you have the close-up, the headshot, the 3/4 length, and the full length. Body language is fundamental at every scale. The headshot or bust represents the distance you are from someone when you're having a conversation with them. You're close, and they've got your full attention. When the head reaches the top of the frame, there's no more empty space and the subject is all there is. It's powerful. The full body is like seeing someone from across the room. You're less attached, we see fewer details, but you notice more their clothing and how they hold themselves. The subject is less intimidating with decreasing size. It's hard to feel overpowered from someone who's far away from you. A small subject size also lends itself to having more negative space in the image, useful for text, secondary subjects, or a feeling of openness. Now for me, the placement of the subject is the fun part. You definitely place the subject in certain parts of the frame when you take the picture, but there's plenty of room to refine the placement or even change it entirely in post-production. Central positioning is power. Mix this with a large subject in the frame and a perspective looking up to the subject, and it is absolute dominance. The subject is in control, and the closer we get, the less we can escape. Positioning the sitter on the very edge of the frame is unsettling, as the sitter's given very little room to breathe. They might look trapped or left out. There's an area you might think of as the rule of thirds, but really it's just a position that isn't the center and it isn't on the edge. Letting the face look into empty spaces feels natural. Looking to the edge of the frame removes the viewer like they're not in on the joke. It's like the subject sees something we can't or we're not allowed to. The same thing with the eyes. If they're looking at you, you naturally look straight back into them as if you were talking to them. If they look away, the viewer's eyes roam. It's more detached, like a fashion image rather than an intimate portrait. The crop is not an afterthought, but a tool that sculpts the voice and the message of a portrait. Strength, power, comfort, vulnerability, friendship, trust, it's in the face, and it's in how the face is presented. There is a lot of control in the crop.